The defendant was drinking, and the defendant decided to drive. Because the defendant was drinking and driving, Vanessa Sullivan is dead. Miss Sullivan and her best friend, Taylor Hobson, wanted to have a fun night. They wanted to celebrate her 21st birthday. And so they arranged to have a designated driver. They arranged to have the defendant drive. But when they got to the bar that night, they found that the defendant had already been drinking. He had had shot after shot, beer after beer. And the defendant kept drinking the whole night. Vanessa Sullivan and Miss Hobson, they started getting worried because they were going to have to get in a car with him to drive home. They didn't know what to do. They hoped that the defendant wasn't that drunk, so they got in the car. But when they got in the car with the defendant, it soon became clear just how intoxicated he was. He began swerving off the road. We heard Vanessa Sullivan screaming in a message to her dad, "Danny, stop being an idiot. Stay on the road." The defendant was speeding. In the pouring rain, at 1 o'clock in the morning, he was determined to make a 20-minute drive in 8 minutes. At some points going more than twice the speed limit, the defendant barrels around a curve. Vanessa Sullivan grabs the armrest. She tells her dad she's going to be home soon. Vanessa Sullivan, a happy, healthy, 21-year-old girl, never made it home. Because what happened in that car is worse than any of us could ever imagine. Miss Sullivan was sitting in the front seat. She was watching as the car barreled off the road for no reason. And when it swerves back onto the road, the defendant's too drunk to keep control. The car hits a utility pole, and the seat that Vanessa Sullivan is sitting in slams into a tree. Miss Sullivan died right then and there, on her birthday. Every day, every year, on Vanessa Sullivan's birthday, her parents will go put flowers on her grave. Because the defendant made a decision to drink and drive. Officer Foster reported to the scene of that crime. He tried to get Miss Sullivan help, but it was too late. He tried to get the defendant help. The defendant told him, "I need another drink." Another drink. After the defendant had had 17 drinks. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the receipts in front of you. We saw how much the defendant drank that night, how much the defendant drank before he got behind the wheel of a car. The defendant's expert witness didn't understand why we were angry. The defendant's own expert witness, who's being paid $7,000 to be here, told you it was inarguable that the defendant was too drunk to drive, but couldn't understand why there was reason to be angry. Vanessa Sullivan's parents, they don't get a choice. They don't get to choose whether or not to be angry. They don't get to choose whether or not to be upset, because someone else made that choice for them. The defendant made that choice when he killed their daughter. Because the way the defendant acted that night is not acceptable and it's not legal. As the prosecution, we have the burden of proof. We have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not all doubt, but that means that there's no doubt in your mind that you can support with reason and evidence that what the defendant did was an unjustifiable risk. the defendant showed indifference to human life, to the two innocent girls in that back seat. But what we heard today is that the defendant took risk after risk. He started off at the bar with 17 risks. Each shot, each beer, each whiskey, that was another risk. The defendant's own witness came and told you how dangerous that road is. Told you that people should be driving 25 miles an hour. But the defendant was going 66 miles an hour. That was another risk the defendant took. It was pouring rain. Miss Hobson begged him to slow down. We heard that recording of Miss Sullivan begging him to slow down because these girls were in fear of their lives. The defendant didn't care. He kept speeding on through anyway. The defendant's choice to drink and drive sent that car flying off the road. Killed Vanessa Sullivan. We heard how drunk the defendant was. Because he'd had 17 drinks at the bar, his blood alcohol concentration was at 0.19, 2.5 times the legal limit. The defense, they tried to bring in an expert to say that his blood alcohol concentration, it was probably around 0.08. That's still too much. 17 drinks is too much. Find the defendant guilty.
Yes, Your Honor. May I take this time to set up the question?
You have a minute 51 left.
No, thank you.
Two more.
What?
Exactly two.
Okay.
Oh, no, you're right.